Okay, I'm going to show you how to make the body for the Loom bear, but you can also take and use this body for any other animal, and you can also take and use this body for a doll. Okay, so if I go in and I start doing other videos on how to do different heads, and I go back and I tell you to do this one, it's because this is a good base for a body, and that includes the limbs. The limbs may change up a bit where you are doing the legs for the upper arms as well, but either way, this is going to be your baseline to go on. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to start off with a drawstring cast on, so you can wrap around previous peg to your starting point and go front, back, all the way around. Okay, when you reach here, toss your first loop you created over. Make sure you hit those corners, you don't want to miss that. Toss bottom loop over, toss bottom loop over. And if you've watched my sphere video, you can start off how to make a basic shape. You can go ahead and start off the beginning of that. So if you've done that before, you can go ahead and do the beginning of it, where all you do is you go in and you do 3 rows and you increase. If you've not, just follow along. Okay. Then I'm going to go behind that peg that I wrapped around. Alright. Now, here's what you want to do. You've got your drawstring cast on done. You want to knit 3 rows. Okay. So just go in and knit 3 rounds. And then you'll do an increase. Okay, so pause the video and get your 3 rounds done, and then I'll come back and show you the next section. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to work on your increase next, and I would suggest you watch the Loom techniques and tips tutorial for this so that you can get it more detailed, because I'm not going to go over this as detailed as I have with the head, because usually you start with the head first, then you move to the body. So this is very similar to the back of the head, except you're not doing so many rows in between. You're just doing 3 rows in between rather than I believe it was 5 rows. Okay, so what you want to do is knit your way over to your first wedge peg. Place your working yarn into the middle of the loom. Pull your first stitch. You'll see 3 notches, 1, 2, 3. You want to pull that top notch back. Place the working yarn in front of the peg and place that stitch back. It's easiest, you don't get confused, if you never let go of the stitch. You want to find the working yarn stitch you just made, which you'll see because it'll stretch, and you want to move it to the previous peg. Okay, then what you want to do is knit both wedge pegs. Okay, then you're going to come over here and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to find that top notch, which is your last previous stitch. You're going to pull it back. Do not release it if you can help it. Place the working yarn in front of the peg and then place that stitch right back where it was. Move the stitch you just made to the previous peg. Then knit. Adjust your wedge to the next set of pegs. Move this stitch here sitting on this peg over, and move this stitch sitting on the wedge peg over. Then what you want to do is go in and snug up those stitches. Alright? Okay. You're going to do that process with every single wedge, and that is considered an increase, a 4 wedge increase. Okay, and you're knitting all the pegs in between. Okay, so at this point, what you'll want to do is 3 rows of knit and 1 row of a 4 wedge increase. Okay, and you're going to do that a total of 3 times. Okay, so you should have 48 pegs when you're done with your increasing, and your last row should be an increase. Okay, so what you'll want to do is pause the video and get yourself out to where you need to be, and when we come back, we will create the leg holes and where you will place your tail or not place your tail. It's entirely up to you, but we're going to show you how to open up the leg holes. And naturally, there's always 3 options. One that'll be easier, but you'll have to sew. One that'll be a little more complex, and then one where you'd have to keep up with your stitches with stitch markers or stitch holder or that kind of thing. Okay, so there's options, and I'm going to show you those options. Okay, I have completed the bottom of the body. Now, if you were doing my other patterns, this is how you do the bottom of the body on all my book patterns. Okay, so nothing changed. You doubled everything. You have 12 rows instead of 6. You're just increasing and doubling it is all you're doing. Okay, so if you're following along with one of my book patterns, this is something that you do for the bottom all the time. The only thing that's going to change with this is that I'm going to do the body so that you have even less sewing to do. You can have more as a choice. Okay, so what you want to do is you have 3 ways you can do this. There's an easier way where you just bind off, cast back on, and then do your leg, and you can just sew it on. Okay, that's an option. The other option is you add your chains back after you've bind it off and cast it back on and work your leg from there. The other option, which gives you a seamless look, it doesn't look like you have any seaming, is to take your stitches off and put them on a stitch holder and then paracord cast back on, and you have actual stitches you can place back on the loom to do your legs. Okay, the arms are going to work differently, but there's 3 options, and I'm going to try to show you all 3 options. But the setup and there's 2 setups that you can do for this next section. Okay, and keep in mind this body is good for if you want to make other animals. Okay, you can do a cat head, you can do a dog head, you can do a doll head. So what I'm probably going to do is in the future, if I'm doing a stuffed animal, I'll probably send you right back to this video. Okay, because it shows you a basic body. The only thing that may change is you may have 2 leg looking things for the top and the bottom. Okay, that may change up. I may do a different body on that one, but for the most part, this is going to be your basic body, and you can put whatever head you want on it. Okay, and the tail will change up too. The tail's going to be done in this area here, and that's doing just like you do the ear on the teddy bear, but I'm going to show you how to do this. Okay, so first things first, you want to go in and you want to knit 2. Alright, then I'm going to show you the easy method. You're going to bind off loosely. You're going to bind off 12. So you're going to knit those 2, take it back 1, toss the bottom loop over, and you are trying to do this as loosely as possible because you are either going to want to add these chains back. If you're going to sew it on, then you can do it tighter. But for the most part, you want to do this as loosely as possible. But you want to bind off Okay, we're going to bind off one more. Again, we're trying to loosely bind off because we're going to add these stitches back to the loom. Okay, and if you want to make sure, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You have 12 empty ones. Okay, because that's already been knitted, you're going to be just working your way around. Okay, so now that you have one leg opening, you're going to need to calculate in your tail area. Okay, and it's still over 8 pegs. This is just like doing a ear that we did on the bear. It's just going to be a little different. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that next. Now we're going to knit 5. This is our space, so that's going to count as 1 because you technically already knitted it. And you're going to do 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now you're going to be working the next 8 pegs just like you did the ear. If you've done that before, you're going to do the next 8 pegs. Okay, and again, you have 3 options you can do. I'm just going to do it to where I just bring the original loops back. I'm going to not attach as I go. This gives me the option if I want to do a little ball of a tail, like if I want to stick a little ball up in there and sew the sides. Okay, that gives you the option. So I'm just going to do that method. I'm going to do the middle method where I just go in and I do it, and then I bring the original loops back to close off the hole. Okay, so I'm going to knit over 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Starting with the peg you finished, I'm going to go back 8. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're going to go back and forth over those 8 pegs for a total of 6 more times. Okay, so I'm going on row 3. Okay, we've done 8 rows. Now we want to do our roundy section for our tail. So what you want to do is you want to knit 7 starting with the peg you finished with. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you want to knit 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you want to knit 5. starting with the peg you finished with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you want to knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you want to knit 5, going back down the tail. So you've just reached the tip, you're going back down the tail. So you're going to knit 5 now. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you're going to start with the peg you finish with and knit 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you want to go in and knit 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Comes off, you just put it back on. 6, 7. You've now completed the tip of your tail. You may want to push down the middle there as much as possible. Now you're going to do the rest of the tail. You're going to do 8 rows back and forth like you did to start. Okay, I'm going to put this in my lap, get that done real quick, and then we'll go on from there how to finish up, and I'll show you the other method to do the other leg. Okay, so I'm going to do 8 rows, and then we're going to move on. Okay, we've done our 8 rows, but we'll need to do a 9th row. We'll need to do a 9th row so we can bring our original loops back and toss over. Okay, now we're ready to bring back our original stitches. Okay, and if you've watched my head video, you know what we're doing. We're going to go to our previous stitch that we haven't messed with, and we're going to go in and we're going to find that bridge. We're going to bring this loop back on. Then you're going to find that notch, and then find this next stitch and bring it back on. You'll see a notch, and you take the stitch that's below the notch. Okay, and it can get difficult in here, and I'm not gonna lie about that. Alright, so there is our notch. There is the thing below it. There's the notch, and you pull up below. Again, you can skip this part, just do 8 and then do 5, but I just don't like having to sew up a tail. I'm kind of lazy like that. Notch, and then there's your next section. I will admit doing it on the wedge section is easier than doing it like this on that inner curve. I won't lie. And you can follow that one back and get that knot check up there. Alright. Okay, now what you want to do is go in, start with the peg you finished with, knit both stitches together. So you're going to knit 2 stitches together all the way over, and this will conclude your tail, which is just like doing an ear if you've done the bear head already. If you're doing a doll, you will skip this section entirely, just knit over these 8 pegs, okay? Alright, we've knitted over and we've done our tail. You should see a tail right there. Okay? Now, what we want to do is knit over 5. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, at this point, you're going to take off 12 stitches. Alright, and I would suggest using these little markers, stitch markers, and pull out 12 of them. And take off 12 because we're going to paracord cast on like Janae from Smitten Kittens does. She takes off her stitches and then she paracord casts back on for doing thumbs of fingerless gloves. It was the most brilliant cast on I have seen. Give her credit all the time for that one. So you just want to take off 12 stitches and put them on little stitch markers, okay? Okay, there's our 12 stitches, and what you may want to do is go in and shove all those stitch markers out of the way, okay? Just shove them out of the way so they're not in your way anymore, okay? Now, as you can see, we're off by like 2. If you want the legs closer together, you're going to just, you're going to continue to knit the 2 to start, but back here, you'll knit 6 instead of 5, alright? So in between your tail and your legs, you'll knit 6 stitches instead of 5, and that'll get you an even spot, okay? So here's what we want to do. We want to take our paracord and we want to lay the paracord on top of the working yarn, and then we want to wrap the working yarn in front of the peg. Take and wrap the working yarn under the paracord and then wrap it in front of the peg. Wrap under the paracord in front of the peg, under the paracord in front of the peg. This is a paracord cast on. Under, in front, under the paracord, in front of the peg, 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 right around the corner, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, and we are at our 12 peg mark, okay? So now what you want to do is just knit over to your starting point again, okay? Now if you're doing it the other way, you just bind off like we did over here. You do the same thing we did over here as we did over here, okay? I'm choosing to show you two options. If you want it seamless for the leg, paracord cast on, take your stitches off and put them on a stitch marker, okay? Alright, at this point, we're back at our starting point, and again, if you want the legs closer together, not so many stitches in between, you're going to knit 6 after you do your leg area, do your tail, then knit another 6, and then you should be where you only have 4 stitches in between your legs rather than 6, okay? So now we're going to knit, knit, 2. Now what we want to do is, in order to have a chain to easily see to put back on, what you want to do is you want to treat it like you're going to do a purl, pull you a loop through, okay? Then what you're going to do is send it behind the next empty peg. This is going to be a chain cast on, alright, so that you have a chain to work with. So you're going to take that loop you just created, you're going to wrap it behind the peg, you're going to take the working yarn and you're going to pull that working yarn through the loop and pull it. This you want to do a little tighter because cast-ons are always looser on the looms anyway, okay? So you'll do this because it's going to show up loose anyway. Alright, so you're going to wrap behind the next empty peg. And you're going to pull the working yarn through that loop. Alright? And you're going to send behind next empty peg, pull through, tighten the loop, and I would suggest tightening as much as possible. Alright, take behind the next empty peg, chain, and pull snug. Behind the next empty peg and pull snug. Okay? You can do this over the next 12 stitches. Now, if you want a bigger leg, you can do 14, but which is what I did the first time when you saw my tan bear, but I thought it was too big at the bottom, so that's the reason why I'm actually doing 12. Alright, wrap behind. Pull through, wrap behind, pull through, almost there. Wrap behind, pull through, and one more wrap behind, pull through. The reason why I do this is so that when I have my loop at the end, I pull it down and place it as a stitch to be knitted onto the next peg that has a stitch, and you knit it. At this point, you're going to knit your way around to the starting point, and then we'll be ready to work on the bulk of the body, okay? I'm going to shove that down so it's out of the way. Alright, it looks a little funky, but it's because you opened up the spot. Alright, so what you want to do is just knit your way back to your starting point. Okay, and here we are at our paracord cast on, and you're just going to knit over like you normally would. Nothing different about it, just work it like it's a normal stitch. Okay. Okay, at this point, you're just going to knit for 16 rounds, okay? And this will be the bottom half of your body. Then we'll be working on knitting flat for the front and back half so that we can be able to work in our arms, okay? So go ahead and pause the video, do knit for 16 rows, and then we'll come back and I'll start showing you how to do the front and back of the body, okay? Okay, I finished my 16 rows, and I'm going to be working the front half of the body, and I'm going to explain this real quick. What I'm doing on the written is based off of after you knit 2, bind off 12. Instead of knitting 5, in the written it's knit 6, then do your tail, then knit 6, then bind off 12 and knit 2. Okay, that'll keep you perfectly even on the loom. You're going to do the same process, but it's just going to, what I'm going to show you is going to be a little offset, but what's going to be in the written is going to be perfectly even, okay? So what's going to be written is you're going to knit over 12, but because we're offset by 1 peg, we're going to be having our new starting point right here. And so what you want to do is you're going to count over 12, place a stitch marker, and then on the other side of your starting point you're going to count over 12. And that'll keep your legs perfectly even so that when you do the arms, they're going to line up perfectly even, okay? So, but on the written, you'll see that it's knit over 12, and this is at your original starting point. You'll knit over 12, and then you'll knit over 24. So we're going to be working between 24 pegs. And what we want to do is make sure that our arms are going to line up like they're supposed to, okay? Because I've put more space between my legs, there's 6 stitches instead of 4. But if you wanted less, then that was going to be 4, and what I've written for is 4 rather than 6, okay? But this is if you want the legs further apart. If you want them close together, follow the written. The process is just tweaked a little bit. It's not a massive amount, okay? So I've already placed my stitch markers on the stitches that I want, as you can see, all right? And what I want to do is get to my new starting point. So I'm going to knit my way over to my stitch marker, okay? Now when I get to my stitch marker, I want you to keep in mind you're going to knit the last stitch, slip the first stitch, okay? Because we want a chain, and I'll make note of that in the pattern, that you always want to knit the last stitch, slip the first stitch. Say that clearly. Okay, so we're on the last stitch, and what you want to do is when you knit that stitch, go ahead and knit it, but because you're going to be adding that chain back to the loom, if you're going to do it the method way I'm suggesting, loosen up that some, okay? Make it where it's loose. Then you can go in and work your way back. And at this point, you're going to be knitting 4 rows of 24 pegs flat back and forth. So I've slipped that first stitch and I'm knitting my way back, okay, over to my other stitch marker. And at this point you are knitting flat, okay? So remember to always knit your last stitch, slip your first stitch, okay? And when you do that, then you will be working back and forth. And you'll be working back and forth for 4 rows, and then you're going to decrease, you're going to do wedge decreases on the 2 wedges you're working on, okay? And you're going to repeat that process. Okay. And once you do the front half of the loom like this, you're going to do the back half exactly the same. So keep that in mind, all right? So I'm almost to my stitch marker over here. Alright, remember I'm knitting that last stitch. I'm going to loosen up the stitch so that it's easier to add on later. Alright, and I'm going to slip it and knit my way back around to here. I'm going to do that for a total of 4 rows. So this is row 1 that we just did. Then you're going to have 2, and then you're going to have 3, and you're going to have 4. You should end up over here when you go to do your wedge decrease, okay? Pause the video, get your 4 rows done, and when we come back, I'll show you how to do the next step, and then I'll explain that you do this set over and over until you're down to 12 stitches, okay? And then you're going to do a total of 5 rows to finish, alright? But I'll explain that. But so far, get your 4 rows done, and then we'll go from there. Okay, we've done our 4 rows, and remember that we are doing basically a 5-row set. And this is our 5th row on the set, okay? So what we want to do is we want to do a wedge decrease. Take your wedges that you're working with right now, because you're not working with these, you're working with these. You're going to take them down to the next set or slot. Go ahead and decrease, move those stitches over to the wedge pegs, okay? And then you're going to knit the row, and you're going to do a total of 3 sets, and then to finish up the body you'll end up doing 5 rows, okay? So go ahead and messed up here, touching those. Okay, you move those over. So when you knit around, you'll knit those 2 stitches together. So I'll say 2 wedge decreases and then knit the row, okay? That'll be your 5th row in your 5-row set. Then you're going to knit 4 rows, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you're going to do another wedge decrease and then knit the row, and then you're going to do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wedge decrease, and I'll have to show you the last wedge decrease. It'll going to work a little differently than you're used to, okay? And then you'll knit for 5 rows, okay? So go ahead and pause the video, knit this row, and then do 2 more sets of 5, and we'll come back and we'll finish up the front half of the body, and then you're going to do the exact same thing at the back half of the body. So we're almost done with the body. I am to my last 5 rows. I've done my last decrease, okay, and now I need to do 5 rows and then bind off, alright? And again, we're still slipping those ends, trying to keep it fairly loose so that we can add those stitches back to the loom. So go ahead and pause the video and complete your 5 rows back and forth and be ready to bind off, and we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side, on the other half of the loom, and I'll show you how to get started with that. And then your body will be done and we'll be ready to start doing the limbs, okay? And that's where some fun comes in and some choices come in too. Alright, so pause the video. get 5 rows done, and then we'll come back. Now that we're done, we're ready to bind off, and that's a pretty standard bind off. Make sure that's loose. Okay, knit the second stitch, take the first stitch back, the second stitch back to the first peg, toss the bottom loop over, and fill in that space. Okay, so the bind off is like normal. If you bind it off before, you're doing it like normal. Knit the second peg, bring it over, and toss the bottom loop over. Okay, so pause the video, bind off like you normally would bind off, and then we will go in and start the other side, and I will let you go in and finish that up. Okay, so pause the video, bind off, and then we'll come back and start the other side of the body. Okay, I've finished binding off, and because of the way you did it, you should have a series of chains on both sides that you'll be able to add back to the loom to do your arms, if you so choose. If you decide you didn't want to do that method, you don't have to. At this point, we're going to start the other half of the loom, and what's going to be the easiest way to do this is if you were continuing to go circularly, you'll start off with this peg over here. Okay, because here's your starting point. So we're going to start over here like if we were going circularly. It doesn't really matter, because either way you're going to do 5 rows, and then you're going to decrease 5 rows. 4 rows, decrease 4 rows, decrease 4 rows, decrease 5 rows. So you're going to do the exact same thing that you did on this side, okay? Same number of rows, alright? Same concept, okay? So you'll want to go ahead and pause the video and complete your body, alright? And then we'll be ready to move on to the limbs. And real quick here, I want to show you how to get the other half set up with that paracord. Okay, so what you want to do is find your paracord ends here. I want to show how you do that. And you want to get your stitch markers here and place one in the loop. And then you can pull the paracord out. And then you want to place one in the next loop. And pull out. And you want to do this all the way around for, I think it's what, 12 stitches, where you add a stitch marker and then you pull out the paracord, so that you should have these all the way around, okay? And then you'll be ready to add those when we start the limbs, okay? So at this point, finish up your body, and that'll conclude this part, and you'll want to move on to part 3 for the limbs, where we show you the options that you have and being able to work up your leg and your arms, and part 3 will also include assembly. So go ahead, finish your body up, and move on to part 3.